Gracious God, give us ears to hear and eyes that see and hearts that are open to receive and respond to your words, your message to us this day. Amen. I once saw a Facebook post from someone who claimed that they were running late for a meeting and they were trying to find a parking spot. And after several minutes of not finding one, they said a prayer to God, and within seconds, a spot opened up. And the hashtag used was blessed. Hashtag blessed. Okay? But what happens if you pray for a parking spot on a Sunday here in Stowe? I don't think a parking spot is going to open up, so are you not blessed, therefore? Right? It reminds me of a story of a guy who was trying to find a parking space at a baseball game, and he was already missing the first inning, so he, again, prayed to God and said, God, if you find a parking space for me, I promise I will never miss church again. Just then, a car pulled out of a space right in front of him, and he said, never mind, I found one. So this summer, we are starting a new sermon series on the Beatitudes, a very well-known selection of Jesus' teachings. And in fact, we just sang and did a response of all of the Beatitudes found in Matthew's version. Now, we know that Jesus was a rabbi, and he was a traveling rabbi. He would preach whenever crowds would gather, and crowds would follow him wherever he went. And in his teachings, depending on where he was, there would be slight variations of some of his teachings. We know that just by looking at the Gospels. But the essence of Jesus' teachings always remained the same and remained consistent and quite radical, especially in that day and age, in that culture, in that context. Now, Matthew's Gospel contains a collection of the sayings of Jesus known as the Sermon on the Mount. And there's also a similar collection in Luke, the Gospel of Luke, entitled the Sermon on the Plain, because clearly he delivered the same sermon in different times and at different locations, and again with slight variations. Now, many of our Holy Land team members are actually here this Sunday, so it's nice to, in fact, we have got raise your hand if you were actually on the Holy Land. We've got actually a good number of people who are here, so wonderful. It's wonderful to have you back as sort of a mini reunion. We were able to visit the Mount of Beatitudes along the hillsides surrounding the Sea of Galilee, and we went to a church that's on a traditional site of where they believe Jesus taught this particular sermon. And the Beatitudes are part of a longer, fuller sermon, but they're probably the most memorable and recognizable. Now, the first, and we're going to look line by line over the summer. We're not going to do it all today. We're going to take one line at a time and look at that sort of in depth over these next 6 to 8 weeks. So Jesus opens, and I think this is actually really important. The first thing that Jesus says is, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." Blessed are the poor, as Jesus says on the plain when he delivers the same sermon, and Luke recounts that. So that seems to be different than finding a parking spot. It may be different than what our society, or how our society defines blessed. Because often, as is the case now, and I suspect as was the case then, that those who accumulated more certainly thought of themselves as blessed, and others probably looked at them and said, well, God's favor is on them. What am I doing wrong that I don't have what they have? I don't have the bigger house or the fancier car or the bigger bank accounts. In fact, I don't have food on my table. I don't know how my family's going to make it through the week. Does that mean God's not with me? Does that actually mean God is against me? Now, we know that many of those who were in Jesus' crowds came from a fishing community. They were farmers. They were poor. And maybe because they were poor in spirit. They were meant to feel and made to feel just down and out about life in general. While others who had more were showcasing that, maybe as a blessing from God. But when Jesus says, blessed are the poor in spirit, he also opens the door to beyond just material poverty. It describes anyone, any of us, who know that we need God's help and God's grace because we don't have it all together. And friends, let me just say that we don't have it all together. I think often we showcase and we promote all the stuff we have to make it seem like we have it all together, when we are struggling in our own way, and we are poor in spirit in our own way. And Jesus says, if that's how you feel, you are actually right where you need to be. Because sometimes, and only in those situations, can we be the most open and receptive to God's help, to God's presence in our lives. Sometimes we think, I'm good. I've got it all together. Look what I have. I don't need God. I don't need help. But that's never really the reality. And so Jesus says, blessed are those who are poor in spirit. Blessed are those when you feel that you are at the end of your rope, feeling helpless and hopeless. Maybe you're suffering the loss of a job or a marriage or failing health, or you're actually coming to the end of your days here on earth. Maybe it's a death of a dream that you once had when you were younger. Jesus says, blessed are the destitute, the downtrodden, and the down and outs. And friends, this is good news because I would expect that we all at times find ourselves in that place at some point. And Jesus is saying, and this was revolutionary then, that doesn't mean that God is against you. You haven't done anything wrong. It's like, actually, you are blessed. God is with you. God is with you. God is for you. We need this news. For those who, for whatever reason, feel like the kingdom of heaven often seems distant and unattainable. Maybe you think that you don't deserve God's goodness. You haven't earned it or warranted it. Or you can't live up to it. Or that for some reason God's favor, God's blessing is not with you. Jesus saying it is. Yours is the kingdom of heaven now. God's presence is felt strongly with you. God's peace, God's love, God's kindness, God's grace. You are in need of it. It is here for you, here and now. And then, of course, there are those who are poor. And Jesus preaches on that as well. There are those who are lacking enough resources and struggle to have enough to eat or adequate housing or gas for their car or any form of transportation, or they don't have enough money to pay their bills. And Jesus says, and again, this is counterintuitive in some ways and certainly countercultural. Jesus says they too are among the blessed in God's eyes and in God's heart. Now, this is certainly what Latin American theologian Gustavo Gutierrez believed and committed his life's work to. His groundbreaking work, A Theology of Liberation, was published in 1971. And many theologians say it changed everything. It seemed to chart a whole new course for the church, especially the Catholic Church, and especially the church in Latin America. Gutierrez examined our concept of God and the Scriptures, but within the Latin American reality of extreme poverty and systemic injustice. And that led to a renewed realization of Christ's presence among the poor and the oppressed, especially in their struggle to end poverty and oppression. And Gutierrez coined a phrase, God's preferential treatment of the poor. That actually all throughout scriptures you see this narrative of God taking the side of the poor, of those who are oppressed, of those who struggle at the hands of injustice, all throughout the scriptures. And then Jesus comes and embodies it in the people he spent time with, in all of his messages. In fact, really the only people Jesus had a hard word for were the really elite and the powerful who kind of lorded their power over everyone else. That was it. Jesus spent time and he preached good news to the poor. Gutierrez writes on these principles about life and death as he experienced them firsthand, thinking about poverty. And his observations from scriptures and from experiences were threefold. First, material poverty is never good, but it is an evil to be opposed. Second, poverty is not the result of fate, or even, in most cases, laziness, but it's due to structural injustices that privilege some while marginalizing others. And third, that poverty is complex. It's a complex reality, and it's not limited to its economic dimension. To be poor often means to be insignificant, to be forgotten about, to be poor in spirit as well. And so when Jesus said, "Blessed are the poor," Gutierrez points out, he does not say, "Blessed is poverty." For Gutierrez, standing in solidarity with the poor means taking a stand against poverty. And he sees that in Jesus' teachings, in his example, that we are called to take a stand with the poor and to stand up against poverty wherever we see it. And so Jesus came to proclaim and to demonstrate this radical reversal that the kingdom of heaven is for those who are poor and those who are poor in spirit. This good news is now given to us, Christ's followers, to share with those who are in need. Because sometimes what people need initially is a word of good news to say, you are not alone, you are not forgotten. God cares about you, God is with you, you are blessed. And then to be shown this reality as it is in heaven, as it will be on earth, that we show this reality through our acts of kindness and generosity and compassion and love. This is what we are called to do. This is the good news of the gospel that we are, as a church, are here to proclaim in word and in deed. And we are honored to have wonderful organizations to partner with in doing this. And so with that said, I would like to welcome Lee Pelletier to come forward from the Stowe Community Fund. And we are so grateful and honored by your presence here with us this day. So, thank you, Lee.
Thank you for inviting me to come and share the work of the Stowe Community Fund. Starting our second year since transition from the Stowe C-19 General Relief Fund to the Stowe Community Fund, there are 3 services that the Stowe Community Fund provides to ensure that those who live and work in Stowe can thrive. The first is emergency support. Thinking about what Pastor Dan was just saying, studies have shown that the majority of people do not have a rainy day fund, and an emergency crisis of $2,000 can cause them to go into a financial death spiral of accumulating debt. So if someone can't afford to pay for their car that broke down, they then can't go to work, and then they risk being able to keep their job. Or whether it's a medical emergency or anything like that. So the Stowe Community Fund steps in on behalf of the community to lend a helping hand during that time and to help provide that bridge of support for an individual or their families so that they can get through that difficult time and come out and be able to support themselves. The second thing that we do is we provide support for our youth. We have worked closely with the schools to provide meaningful support to the students in our town. This has included a holiday gift drive for our middle and high school students and food assistance for families during school breaks. For the past 2 summers, the Stowe Community Fund has paid for summer camps for Stowe students to ensure equity and access to all the recreational opportunities that make our town so special. In addition, we have helped pay for after-school care to support parents who are struggling financially so that they can continue to work while their children are taken care of. The third is we provide publicity and a central mechanism for fundraising. As the Stowe Community Fund has become a recognized nonprofit in our town, we have supported individuals by helping to publicize GoFundMe campaigns. And when there have been multiple fundraisers for a common cause in our town, the Stowe Community Fund has provided support by being the central conduit for fundraising efforts. What are the benefits of a community fund? First, we're able to be flexible. While Stowe Community Fund is primarily known for our work providing assistance to those in need, what the community fund develops into is determined by community investors. So if, for example, and this is my dream, there's a major donor out there who wants to spearhead the building of a senior center in our town, the Stowe Community Fund can help facilitate that. We're nimble. When there's a crisis situation, the Stowe Community Fund has the ability to respond quickly to help. Between all the members of the Stowe Community Fund board comprised of community leaders and business owners, Jeff Clark, Heidi Schuerman, Billy Adams, Candace Elmquist, Leslie Anderson, and Elise McKenna, we usually can find a connection to the person in need, and then we can help that person connect to available services in our community. There have been multiple times when the Stowe Community Fund has provided immediate support within 48 hours from the time of crisis. The Stowe Community Fund hopes to work with you and collaborate in the same way that we have with our schools and health centers. We believe that those on the front line have the best understanding of the needs of our community. If you know of an individual or family who may need our services, or if you would like to spearhead an initiative, the Stowe Community Fund would love to work with you. Thank you.